That's what's going on. It's Preacher. I'm looking at the Enhancement Shaman, continuing our little Shaman-themed week. And this thing is pretty special. I've had a love-hate relationship with the Shaman for Enhancement specifically for a very long time. In fact, saying it was one of the most clusterfucked, blunderous specs in the game. I know I believe that. I think this is something you can actually enjoy, especially if you are very used to the mop style of melee, which was very fast and furious and intense, especially as gear levels got very, very high. And we've seen a large representation of Enhancement Shamans grow over the course of Warlords of Draenor, especially down to their Fire Nova, which has sadly been nerfed. But there are several occasions, such as Imperator and Darmok and all these things, where Enhancement Shamans, due to their kind of unique nature of having a single target increase from AoEing, which is a little bit rare, have been actually pushed to the forefront and given special duties and tasks. So more people have gone, okay, this is no longer a raid cooldown-less spec with more buttons to press than anything else, and also doing weak DPS. That's not the case anymore, thanks to significant changes. So we're going to talk about how you play it. I'm going to talk about all the fun things. I've come down to Orgrimmar for this, because there's a few things to demonstrate, which I think will help you out with picking this up. This is the basic guide. We'll look at the advanced stuff in the future, but if you generally want to get to know about this thing, this is where we start. Okay, so Specialization Enhancement. We pick up Storm Strike. We are dual wield only these days. We have Lava Lash, which, because of Lava Lash, I'll point this out now because people always ask this. Yes, you have your strongest weapon in your offhand, okay? Lava Lash, you charge your offhand weapon with lava, instantly dealing fire damage to an enemy and spreading flame shock to all the targets, which we'll talk about. Well, 6 targets, should be said. That's very important because it procs as well. It can reset very quickly, which means more Lava Lashes, and generally it works out better to have your strongest weapon in your offhand. Feral Spirit, the doggies, the big cooldown that we have, and then we have a numerous things proccing from Maelstrom weapon, which learning to use correctly is going to be kind of a big deal. Now, there are a lot of buttons to press with Enhancement Shaman. Not only do we have totems in terms of the Searing totem, but we also have Magma totem that we need to be aware of as well. We also have pets in the form of the Fire Elemental totem, and if we should choose it, we have a Storm Elemental totem as well. Now, correct usage of your pets is a very, very, very big deal to the Enhancement Shaman. Okay, very big deal. You will start to see your pets do significantly more damage as your gear increases, and they take the benefit of your stats, which means using them under the effects of cooldowns and procs and all that kind of stuff is 2 thumbs fresh. Very, very important, okay? So we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, as I said, a lot of buttons. We have Storm Strike, Flame Shock, 2 to 3 different types of totems, Lava Lash, Lightning Bolt, Chain Lightning, Frost Shock, Fire Nova, Searing Totem, Unleash Weapon, and our Shield, and that is just our general buttons before we start using cooldowns and stuff. Yeah, a lot to do. There's no other melee in the game that has as much to do as Enhancement Shaman. And that is why it has this kind of DDR effect. People seem to think that, there's so much going on, all I need to do is press everything when it's off cooldown, and I should be okay, which is not how it plays. This is a very fast spec, but it's also harmonious. It's really harmonious. There's a great symphony, almost a ballet of things to be doing, and once you understand why you're doing them, it makes total sense. So, before we get too far into it, I do want to explain a couple of things. We've explained Lava Lash and its ability to charge your offhand weapon and why that affects your offhand weapon, and that it spreads Flame Shock to other targets. Very important while we're AoEing. Flame Shock. Flame Shock is very important, okay? There's a common sense reason that we have Flame Shock on our target, and that is because it resets, okay? Improved Flame Shock, your Flame Shock deals damage over time. You have a 15% chance, not a huge one, to reset the cooldown of Lava Lash every time your Flame Shock ticks. So, common sense tells us we want Flame Shock up 100% of the time. Why? Because it gives us more Lava Lashes. Very simple, very easy to understand why we do that. Why we prioritize Flame Shock, number 1, to be on the target, because it procs our big heavy hitting spell in the form of Lava Lash, yeah? So that's why we do that. Flame Shock is so important then, and we want it up 100% of the time, that we want our Flame Shock to be as powerful as possible, which is why Unleash Elements then comes into play as our next priority. You see how this sort of makes sense. Unleashes elemental forces of flame and wind, increasing the damage done by the Shaman's next fire spell by 40%. So, we have to have Flame Shock up 100% of the time, so we might as well use that with Unleash Elements to make sure we have a super powerful Flame Shock. And then comes the Unleash, as you can see there, Flame Shock, and then we have a very powerful Flame Shock on there. Now, we want Flame Shock on the target to reset Lava Lash more than anything, yeah? So that means we don't need to be spamming it. As you can see, our shocks have a very short cooldown, 5.28 seconds, yeah? With the Glyph, our Frost Shock is 3.52 seconds. Due to Pandemic, Okay, a big thing you'll hear about in most of my guides, Pandemic means we can refresh Flame Shock early and it won't lose any damage. Now, we can refresh it round about 9 seconds till it runs out, and we can do that very, very easily. When it's below 9 seconds, refresh Flame Shock, and then it'll just continue to do perfect damage without losing or costing you anything, without wasting any resources, which is terrible for DPS. Don't want to waste resources. Our Unleash Elements has a 13-second cooldown. This actually marries up really nicely. So while people are struggling with their buttons, if we use Unleash and then we use Flame Shock and then we go into blah 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 DPS, what you'll notice is that the second time your Unleash comes back up, that's around the time you want to be Flame Shocking again. Which means you don't need to worry about Flame Shock too much. See how Unleash pops up here? So I'll use an Unleash. That's all fun and games. Happy, happy days. Can spam, 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 spam. Do my usual nonsense. And you can see I have no real active tracker for Flame Shock. And that's because when my Unleash pops back up... Oh, here's Unleash. That means it's time to Flame Shock. Every 2 Unleashes, I will Flame Shock. I will never lose any damage from it. It's all happy days. A nice synergy that's going on there. They work out and they marry up really nicely. Okay, so those are our next priorities. Our next priority is Lava Lash. Why? Because improved Flame Shock can reset it. So we want Lava Lash to be on cooldown. Simple as that. Let's get rid of our Lava Lash. Why? Because Flame Shock has a wonderful chance of giving it us back again. And if it's just sitting around waiting to be used, as we just seen there, Lava Lash came back, then we're just losing Lava Lashes. About the same priority is Storm Strike. Okay, Storm Strike is a very cool spell as well, and this is why Enhancement Shaman are quite interesting, because their spells all work together. Storm Strike not only does damage, it throws both your weapons at the target, kicking some ass. It grants you an additional 25% chance to the enemy to crit the enemy with nature spells. Nature spells come in the form of Badumph, Lightning Bolt, and Chain Lightning, of course. So Storm Strike and Lightning Bolt, which is a result of our Maelstrom weapon, synergizes as well. So you can see how the priority starts to make total, absolute clear sense. All these spells work together and makes them very important. So that's our priority list. Flame Shock on, Storm Strike and Lava Lash on cooldown. And as soon as you get 5 procs of Maelstrom weapon, you can see it charging up here. If I spam some buttons, you see I've got 3 charges. And then you can, as I press Lightning Bolt by accident, let's get back to it. There you go, 5. Once you get 5, you get an instant cast Lightning Bolt, which works well with the Storm Strike debuff. Okay, absolutely wonderful. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this rotation. So we have some downtime. The thing with Enhancement Shaman, which is why people get a bit panicked with it and find it a little bit on the struggly side, is because you have all these abilities. You have all these abilities. Now, what do you do with them all at once? Now, I've explained to you the priority system, which should all make perfect sense to you by now, I hope. What about when it doesn't work? So if I put everything on, what Enhancement Shaman tend to do, because they have so many spells, is they run into these weird periods where they just have nothing to press, like this. This is where Frost Shock comes in. Now, Frost Shock is absolutely shite. Okay? I'll tell you now, absolute shite. It's a terrible spell. It's crap. It does very little damage. It's your absolute lowest priority because Enhancement Shaman have so many buttons on such small cooldowns that they're either all up at the same time and you have things to do, or, as you can see, I have these periods here where there's always something to do, and then you run into periods like this where there's just nothing there. And that's when you start throwing in your Frost Shocks. But it's nowhere near as important as Flame Shock. Please do not put your shock on constant cooldown in order to try and squeeze out many Frost Shocks. Don't do that. What you want to do is fit in Frost Shock where you can. Okay? Where you can, fit it in, and then make sure Flame Shock's on. It's as simple as that, guys. Nice and easy. Let's talk about our talents, because this is going to affect how we decide to play. Enhancement Shaman have different play styles depending on how they play. So at level 15 you get something that defends you. Astral Shift is generally the go-to, as is Windwalk Totem in the next one, but obviously Earth Grab has some usefulness if you're going to be trapping something. It's very, very rare though. At level 45 I can consider Totemic Projection to be the mandatory one. Why? Because as a melee, we generally can't move around that much. We need to stick, if this was our boss, we need to stick to him like glue, because that's who we're killing. But what about if there's some reason we're AoEing the ads over here? What we can do with Totemic Projection is we can actually send our totem over there, as you can see. My Magma totem is over there. While I can maintain doing DPS over here, I can send my totems wherever I might want. And that is absolutely fantastic, because, you know, that's something you should be taking advantage of all times. Especially on WoD. In a lot of WoD encounters, our AoE position, say well, we're going to AoE here, that's very rarely actually the case, unless it can be really controlled. If we think about fights like Imperator, Okay, and all those kind of things. We might start the fight over here. Within 20 or so seconds, we've probably ended up over here due to various movement conditions. So if we drop our Searing Totem on top of us, which is what we're forced to do as a melee, then that's no good to us when we're way over there. So when we drop a totem as an Enhancement Shaman, what you should be thinking is this a good place for me to keep this totem for a full minute? Am I going to be in range of this for a full minute? If not, pick somewhere central like this. Your Searing Totem will do just fine out here in the open. And that makes totemic projection for an Enhancement Shaman really good. Really, really good. At level 60, these are all really close. Fantastic. Choice, choice, choice. I love Elemental Mastery. Oh, I love it. Because it's 30% haste while we're under big cooldowns. Haste is one of the primary stats of Enhancement Shaman. It helps our pets out. It does all kinds of cool things. Echo the Elements gives 2 charges on Storm Strike, Lava Lash, and Fire Nova. Now, some people will say this, like, Ancestral Swiftness is, like, the easy one to get used to. I disagree. I think Echo of the Elements is actually the easy one. Why? Because of what we said earlier with Lava Lash sending out our Flame Shocks. It's very important in AoE. So if I Lava Lash this, you can see these guys have no Flame Shocks. If I Lava Lash them, they all do. Having 2 charges on your Lava Lash means that you very rarely run into the situation which is a nightmare for Enhancement Shamans, which is suddenly all the ads appear and your Lava Lash is on cooldown. And Echo the Elements kind of cancels that out. Also gives you double Fire Nova, which we'll talk about shortly, which is your big killer spell. Okay, so it gives you a lot of AoE burst and kind of guarantees that you'll be able to spread your Flame Shock instantly. If you're struggling with your Enhancement Shaman and setting up AoE, Echo the Elements is for you, in my opinion. Level 75, Conductivity is kind of the only way to go, really. If you're going to throw a Healing Rain down, which for an Enhancement Shaman is actually really easy to do because it works with Maelstrom Weapon. I'll show you that now. So if I cast a Healing Rain now, you can see I've got a cast time. If I go over and generate some Maelstrom procs, there's 5, but my Healing Rain is still on cooldown. Give it a second. 1 second, and there it is. So my boys, my melee gangsters are in trouble. Oh, there you go. Instant Healing Rain. And with Conductivity, I can maintain that through my Lightning Bolts. Very, very cool. So Conductivity is really good. At level 90, all very close again. Elemental Blast is just an extra button. I don't recommend it. You don't need it as enhancement. You have so much else to do. Don't fucking worry about Elemental Blast. Primal Elementalist, though, holy shit, do your pets start doing crazy damage. When you start getting some good trinkets and Bloodlust and fucking Elemental Mastery and all that kind of gangster swag rocking on your character, my god. Primal Elementalist, your pets will start doing crazy, ludicrous damage. So, I love it. Great burst. On-demand burst. Should something need to die. You can even glyph your Fire Elemental to give it a shorter cooldown, so you can, like... If you've got something that comes up kind of every couple of minutes that really needs to fucking die super fast, Fire Elemental with Primal Elementalist, sweet. Sweet as a nut. Unleash Fury is a passive, so it's kind of easier to use because you'll be using Unleash Elements anyway for the reasons we talked about earlier, and you'll get lots more damage from Unleash Fury, so really cool. Level 100, Elemental Fusion, kind of a waste of time. What you're going to picking really is Storm Elemental, Totem, or Liquid Magma. Liquid Magma is way cooler. There's no doubt about it. Liquid Magma is way, way cooler. I mean, just look at this thing. It's so fucking cool. Blah, 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 and just screws everything up. But it's really good for AoE. If you're doing constant AoE, Liquid Magma is the way to go. If you're doing single target, Storm Ele is the way to go. Storm Ele is just absolutely fantastic. Just be aware, if you pop Liquid Magma, it's on a 45-second cooldown, and your totems last like a minute. Your totem needs to be alive for Liquid Magma to work. Which means if your totem has like 8 seconds left and you pop this and it lasts 10 seconds, you will lose 2 seconds of Liquid Magma. It makes you cry at night. It makes you go to bed and wonder about your life. It really does. Liquid Magma, because you might have a Magma totem that's got like 4 seconds left and you're like, oh, Liquid Magma's off cooldown. Pop it, and then suddenly your totem disappears. And as you can see, if I pop Liquid Magma here and then get rid of my totem, my Magma disappears. And then you cry because you just wasted a major cooldown because it does so much damage. It really does. Storm Elemental Totem, if you do take it, which you probably will if you're single targeting, you want to pop this thing under the effects of cooldowns. It's more prioritized than the Fire Ele. So when your big pet at the start is your Storm Elemental Tome, kick that off. And then try and wait for your Fire Ele while you're under the effects of other cooldowns and procs and all that kind of stuff. Storm Ele, very cool actually. Just be a little side note here from having played it for a while, is if you have healing on your screen, turn it off. Because the combined healing that you get from pets and then Storm Elemental Totem, your screen is spammed with the most redundant healing in the world. Just be aware of that, okay? So, Storm Elemental Totem, great single target damage. Go ahead and use it. But yeah, be aware, turn your healing off. If you have it like displayed on your screen in some manner, it will just fill up the melee area, which is already a clusterfuck. So, just be aware of that as well. Okay, so Glyphs. Glyph of Chain Lightning is the one you'll be swapping in and out mostly. Your Chain Lightning spell. If you're doing big AoE, you want the extra 2 targets on Chain Lightning. If you don't, though, don't forget to unglyph it. Yeah, if you're just doing some cleave up to 2 to 3 targets, get rid of the Glyph of Chain Lightning because you're just losing damage, which kind of sucks. Look at your Feral Spirits for increasing healing done and all that kind of stuff. Depends on the fight. Fire Rally is the one people take advantage of. A little quick note here on Primal Elementalist. It's based on your pets. Your pets have interesting cooldowns, like 5 minutes. Yeah, they have 5-minute cooldowns, which means, and they last like a minute. So the way you need to think about Primal Elementalist is in 6-minute chunks. If the fight lasts 7 minutes, or just over 6 minutes, then your pet is really, really crucially important. Yeah, because you're getting 2 uses out of it. You're getting 2 uses out of it, and that is really a lot of damage. But as soon as that 6 minutes is over, you're starting to see Unleashed Fury creep up until you can use your Elemental again for another full minute. I hope this makes sense to you. So with a 6-minute fight, you use your Elemental at the beginning, and then you have it for 1 minute. Then you have a gap until it's back off cooldown. Then you can use your Elemental again for another full minute. So in those 6 minutes, you had 2 minutes of Elemental uptime. That means it did the most damage possible. But as every time in that gap, that 4-minute gap that goes on, your Elemental isn't doing damage. It doesn't exist. It's not out. In which case, Unleashed Fury creeps forward. So just be aware of how long a fight lasts, and are you going to get the full benefit of this ability? Are you going to get it? Because it gets weaker in between those gaps. If you use the Glyph, though, you can kind of cheat a bit, because it reduces the cooldown and duration of Fire Rally by 50%. Okay? So what this means is, yes, you get more Fire Elemental totems, but it also changes the gap distance, because instead of that, it'll be a 2.5-minute gap. Okay, so then you start messing around with the times of the fight, and bearing in mind, can you use it under the effects of decent cooldowns to get the most out of it as well? So an interesting glyph. Enhancement Shaman really need to think about their pets. Think about how long the fight is. For those durations, Unleashed Fury creeps ahead. If you don't get to use your Primal Elemental for a decent chunk of time, then Unleashed Fury starts to wean ahead, okay? So boss time's very important for that. Glyph of Lava Spread. I use this because, obviously, I bob into the Alpha and stuff a lot for you guys to demonstrate some stuff, and tanks just don't like damage, apparently, and don't like people to AoE, so they tend to have adds over here, and this is just something that I just felt I needed. Increase the radius at which Lava Lash spreads Flame Shock by 8 yards. So when tanks are bad tanks are a nightmare for Enhancement Shaman, then it's not too bad, okay? So it helps out a little bit. If your things are spread out, Fire Nova can be handy for you. Glyph of Frost Shock is kind of the mandatory one. Decreases the cooldown incurred by a Frost Shock by 2 seconds. As I said, Frost Shock is pretty shitty, but you'll have regular opportunities to use it. So the more timings it has, the better, because you don't know when them downtime periods where Frost Shock fits in will happen. So the shorter cooldown, the better. Tends not to affect Flame Shock too much as well, which is really nice. Little touch on Maelstrom Weapon. So we've talked about having a totem down, fire totem down, and we're Flame Shock on, and then we're getting rid of our Lava Lash and Storm Strike. We talked about these downtime periods. Now, what will happen on occasion is that you'll run into periods of time where you have nothing to press, and you have this. This is an exact situation. So those couple of seconds where I had 4 Maelstrom procs, and every single one of my other spells is on cooldown, you're absolutely fine to go ahead and get rid of your Maelstrom Weapon by doing a 4-stack hard cast is what it's called. Basically, you're casting it at 4 stacks like this. So you cast it very... See how quick it is? There is no problem in doing that. Now, having said that, you're not aiming to always use Maelstrom Weapon at 4 stacks. That's not what you're aiming to do. Enhancement Shaman do have this issue where occasionally they have nothing to press for a few seconds. And then during that time, you might have 4 Maelstrom Weapon procs ready to go. Not quite at 5, but sitting there. And in those situations, you can absolutely hardcast Lightning Bolt. That is absolutely fine. That is good DPS, okay? Maelstrom Weapon is unpredictable. Very unpredictable, okay? You can go, and I'll see if we can demonstrate it quickly, but as it's unpredictable, maybe not, is that it can go from no stacks for ages, like we're sitting here at 1 stack, and look, nothing's happening, and then suddenly the damn thing shoots up to 5 stacks before you know what's going on. And it's a real pain in the ass in that way. It procs so randomly, you have to have your finger on the button. Because as soon as Maelstrom Weapon procs, and it's at that 5 stacks, you want to use it. Yeah? You absolutely want to use it and get rid of it. So bear that in mind for Maelstrom Weapon. AoE! Let's talk about AoE and how Enhancement Shaman AoE works, because a lot of people get this confused, I find. You have to think of, when you're AoE, you have to think of your Flame Shock as a bomb. And your Fire Nova is just the detonator. Now, Fire Nova, some people confuse Fire Nova with actually, like, detonating you. It doesn't work that way. It just does not work that way. What Fire Nova does is it checks the targets that have Flame Shock, and then it detonates those Flame Shocks. You don't even have to be stood near them, okay? If I move over here, I can still Fire Nova. You saw the explosion? I can still Fire Nova from there. Now, the way the Fire Nova does most of its damage is it spreads out the Flame Shock with Lava Lash, as you can see. When I detonate it, all of these detonate. And they all hit each other. Okay? They're all miniature bombs going off all at the same time. So what you want is those bombs to overlap. This is why when you have a bad tank who spreads ads around and all that, you can get really frustrated and start thinking about the glyphs. Because what you're after is the Flame Shocks to overlap each other. Okay? You want those Flame Shock bombs to overlap each other. Boom. So it does that. What you don't want is, say, a Flame Shock on a target over there. You're AoEing here, and suddenly the tank's pulled it off over there, and you go ahead and Fire Nova, and it's just this one piss-ass little Fire Nova. A single Fire Nova isn't worth the fucking paper it's printed on. What you're after is close-up gathered targets all bombing each other. Okay? But that does mean that we can take advantage of that if we have bad tanks or there's something going on. If we are AoEing these, but suddenly we have to switch over here, we can still Fire Nova all those targets while we're over here. Do you remember I said earlier about projecting our totems back over there? So while I'm fighting here, I can absolutely Fire Nova the targets over there. Absolutely. Now, Fire Nova does a tremendous amount of damage. It's really, really crucial. It's also on a ridiculously low cooldown, 3.96 seconds, or about 2 global cooldowns. You need to start Fire Novaing as soon as possible, because it only takes a few ads before you'll start seeing things like 200k Fire Novas every 4 seconds. Okay? Every second you delay doing those Fire Novas is 200,000 damage gone, potentially, right? It's just disappeared into the ether. Somebody else has taken it off you. This means you need to be very careful with your Lava Lash, because Lava Lash is the key. It's the setup. Without the Lava Lash to spread all the Flame Shock bombs to all the targets, your Fire Nova doesn't do fuck all. It's garbage. Does nothing. Shit. So, you need to be very wary of your timers as an Enhancement Shaman. You need to be. You need to be on the case. You will drop Magma Totem while you're AoEing, even at like 2 targets. Okay? Keep your Magma Totem down. Be aware that you'll need your Magma Totem near you. And you will be like, oh, ads are coming in 2 seconds. I'm not going to cast a Lava Lash. Lava Lash's base cooldown is 9 seconds. Now, you'll say to me, Preacher, it procs all the time. Yes, it does. But I guarantee you that if you try and use it thinking it's gonna proc before the ads come in 5 seconds, the motherfucker will not proc, and it will stay on cooldown, and these ads will be running around with no Flame Shocks on, and you will do some pissant fiddly Fire Nova that does nothing. Okay? Absolutely nothing. So bear that in mind. On top of that, of course, we're stacking up cooldowns. So if we are going to use our Fire Elemental, and we have things like Elemental Mastery and Dogs, use them all together, baby. Go into the big Ascendance, yeah? Nothing changes too much under Ascendance for the old Enhancement Shaman. Just be aware of the haste. And, of course, while you have all these cooldowns on, boom, stick a Fire Elemental out and let that bad boy kick some ass and take some names. All right? Very, very cool. Make sure that when you're popping your Liquid Magma, should you have taken it, just check how long your Fire Totem's got left. You want 10 seconds. Otherwise, you'll end up in a whole world of hurt. For your gemming, you're going for haste. This guy's primarily elemental, so he's gemmed for multi-strike. But you will be gemming haste if you're a permanent Enhancement Shaman, and you'll be doing that to about 50%, and then you'll kind of mishmash some mastery into there. You'll see a lot of Enhancement Shamans gem 1 weapon with haste, 1 weapon with mastery. That's because, obviously, it takes them over 50%. In current gear, you'll be gemming haste, and then you have your weapons enchanted with mastery and 1 with haste, and that's all you need to do, guys. That is your Enhancement Shaman. Let's jump into some gameplay. I hope you now get it. It all makes perfect sense. Alright, guys. Thank you very much for listening. Let's jump into some gameplay and see all this in action. Bye-bye.